Hey, I'm Trevor Loy, and I'm the lead pastor at Terrace Foursquare Church. We're so grateful that you've tuned in with us for this podcast. Terrace Foursquare is a church that is on mission with Jesus to transform lives. So if you need any more information about our church or about our messages, please go to our website to terracefoursquare.org, and that's where you can find it or get in contact with us. So we hope that you would enjoy our teaching today.
All right, so we have Pastor Don Cain. Come on up, Pastor Don. And woo! Don is the missions pastor at Mill Creek Foursquare Church, and I could tell stories of his kindness and his lack thereof. No, I'm kidding. We like to play jokes, me and him, and he's won the last battle, but he's just storing up. He's just storing up the next one. But I love Don, Pastor Don and Sue. They have been so amazing. What marks their life is faithfulness. And you look up to them and you look at their steadiness and their story and their good and bad. And I just am so thankful that we have an example like Pastor Don and Sue, and thankful to have them here sharing with us. So without further ado.
All right.
You're up.
Hey, I appreciate that, Pastor Trevor.
Yeah.
Well, it is good to be here with you this morning. It's good to see some familiar faces and to meet some new people as well. And so, as Pastor Trevor talked about, I've been at Mill Creek for a little over 18 years now, and it is a good place to work, and it is to serve and to be in community with those, just kind of see the transitions over the course of life. So I've known Trevor since he was in high school, and I am just incredibly humbled by the vulnerability and the honesty of Erica and Trevor as they share lives. And the statement that she made, it's hard to walk in difficulty in a public way, but it's not hard when community comes alongside of you and loves you. That is a tremendous statement. And so this morning, I'm going to be sharing on a passage that I heard a sermon when I was in Louisville, Kentucky. Back in August, I was visiting family back there, and I had the opportunity to go to one of the larger churches in the country. It was one of their satellite churches. It was only about a mile away from the house that my aunt and uncle that I was staying at. And so I went to this church. It's called Southeastern Christian Church. Kyle Eidelman is the pastor and just a tremendous speaker. And he spoke on a passage, Psalm 55, talking about stress. And there were just certain issues of life that I was going through at the time and still in the journey, which you'll hear in a minute. And it just resonated with me. And so I want to give Pastor Eidelman, the credit is this idea was his, but the stories are mine. And so stress, anxiety, we don't have to go far to hear that. With the access to social media, Twitter, Facebook, the news, Instagram, we are inundated with stories and situations all around us. We are saturated with information about tragedy or challenges that are before us, in the vast majority of which we have no ability to be able to do anything about. And so it's kind of like, as I was reflecting on that concept of how we are overwhelmed with stress. It doesn't take long. You just watch the news and you see just some of the current storylines that are happening there. With the global warming, it's the polar ice caps up in the Arctic are melting. The first time ever that the Arctic Ocean is thawed, it's not frozen over. Antarctic, the huge things breaking. Ice shelves breaking off, the whole fear that in global warming of the waters rising, and I love to play at the beach and make sandcastles and sculptures. It's one of our hobbies that we do, and I'm thinking, what's going to happen to my beach? It's just, we listen to the news and we hear about it. Is President Trump going to be impeached? Is he not going to be impeached? Was there a phone call that was made? What was in the context of that phone call? And we hear about all the political issues that are going on. And we just look at life in general. And you just have this level of anxiety and stress that gets built up over the course of time. And so much of what we hear, we have no ability or capacity to do anything with that. And what I've come to realize in my own life, how do I handle this? What is it that I do to try and grapple with the issues that are before me, or if there's anything that I can do with them? How do I steward my own life in the midst of all the stress and the circumstances that surround us that amp up the whole tension level of our lives? As a staff at Mill Creek Foursquare, we read a book over the summertime called Becoming Whole. And the author, Fikert, talked about surveys that were done globally about joy and happiness for developed nations. And so he talked about those who were high on the list and those who were worst on the list. And the U.S. was worst on the list. We live in a culture of stress and anxiety. We live in a culture that has stress, things that are pressing into us, some that are beyond our control, others that we invite into it. If you're a parent with children, you understand this very clearly. You worry about their education. You worry about their sports teams. If they're on a select team, are they going to be good on the select team? Are there other things that we need to get them engaged in so they're fully developed? And we have children that are overbooked and overstressed. And it's a culture that just gets inculcated with anxiety and stress on a regular basis. So this morning, we're going to talk about Psalm 55 and talk about David as he's coming and just being very real and honest and vulnerable about his circumstances. And I think that there's some things that we could learn from David in our own life, in our own situation. So let's go ahead and read this. Psalm 55. Listen to my prayer, O God. Do not ignore my plea. Hear me and answer me. My thoughts trouble me, and I am distraught because of what my enemy is saying, because of the threats of the wicked, for they bring down suffering on me and assail me in their anger. My heart is in anguish within me. The terrors of death have fallen on me. Fear and trembling have beset me. Horror has overwhelmed me. I said, oh, that I had the wings of a dove, that I would fly away and rest. I would hurry to my place of shelter far from the tempest storm. Lord, confuse the wicked, confound their words, for I see violence and strife in the city. Day and night they prowl about its walls. Malice and abuse are within it. Destructive forces are at work in the city. Threats and lies never leave the streets. If an enemy were insulting me, I could endure it. And if a foe were rising up against me, I could hide. But it is you, a man like myself, my companion, my close friend, with whom I once enjoyed sweet fellowship at the house of God, that we walked about among the worshipers. Let death take my enemies by surprise. Let them go down alive among the realm of the dead, for the evil finds lodging among them. As for me, I will call to God, and the Lord saves me. Evening and morning, noon and noon, I cry out in distress, and he hears my voice. He rescues me unharmed from the battle waged against me, even though many oppose me. God, who is enthroned on old, who does not change, he will hear them and humble them because they have no fear of God. My companions attack his friends, and he violates his covenant. His talk is smooth as butter, yet war is in his heart. His words are more than oil, yet they are drawn swords. Cast your cares on the Lord, and he will sustain you. He will never let the righteous be shaken. But you, God, will bring down the wicked in the pit of decay. Bloodthirsty and deceitful will not live out half their days. But as for me, I trust in you. Now, that's not the most pick-me-up psalm that you would ever hear. Psalms are basically prayers. David was the primary writer of the Psalms. There are a couple other writers in there, but he wrote the vast majority of the Psalms. And Psalms are written in a poetic manner. Oftentimes they're put to music and sang. Now, this particular song, I don't know how we could put it to music, but it was actually meant to be sung. There are some key things that David talks about, and I think things that I have learned over the past couple months when I first started studying this, and that I think that we could learn together. One is that when we look at the Psalms, they are raw emotion. They are honest, they are real. David spares no political correctness. That's not the right way to say that. He is less concerned with political correctness when he comes and he just shares his true inner feelings of the circumstance. Now, Psalm 55, there was a companion that David had essentially grown up with. And during Absalom's rebellion against David, this particular friend joined in there, and David felt a great sense of betrayal. So this individual that he identified with, or this individual that he shared life with, or that he worshiped with, was now the one that is opposing him. And David is just sensing this tremendous sense of betrayal in this. And you could, as we went through and read the psalm, you could see the anxiety and the emotion that David was feeling. And yet I think that there's some key points here that we could take away that apply to our own lives, that I know that I have applied to mine over a current season of life, that have given fresh perspective and understanding of how do I address these issues? How do I overcome this level of stress, this level of anxiety? And life is complicated, and this is not what I'm going to share this morning. It's not a panacea that will solve all stress and anxiety issues, but it will give us a perspective that we can apply as we see those things happening. Okay, so first point in verses 1 through 3. We see David coming, and he says, "Listen to my prayer, O God. Do not ignore my plea. Hear me and answer me. My thoughts trouble me, and I am distraught because of what my enemy is saying, because of the threats of the wicked, for they bring down suffering on me and assail me in anger." One of the first things that we can learn of David with this psalm is that David is brutally honest with God. He is vulnerable and transparent, and he is honest with God. His plea is that God would hear his request. Oftentimes in community and in the Christian realm, when people express themselves or are going through difficulties, we try to talk them out of it and oversimplify. We try to take the easy way out of removing their pain. And oftentimes it just does more damage. When we come to somebody and when we give the impression or tell them specifically, well, you shouldn't be feeling that way. And particularly of those that if you maybe have been following Christ for a while, there's an element of reluctancy to be completely honest, completely transparent and vulnerable for fear of what somebody else may say. Or fear if they go to God and say these things that he's going to be offended. That the creator of the universe, the one who made everything, would come and be offended at what we have to say when we come in honesty and vulnerability and transparency. He desires for us to do that. He desires for us to come and just lay things out before him. The emotions that we feel, the feelings that we have, will not last. There are seasons of life that we go through, the ups and downs, that the emotions are neither good nor bad, they simply are. And when we recognize what it is that we're feeling and how we're experiencing life and what some of the struggles and issues are that we have, it takes courage to be able to address those and to be able to express those and to be able to invite others into that journey so that they too may be able to walk with us. Over years of pastoring, one of the things that I've seen it time and time again, I've done it many times early on in ministry, So when somebody comes and they share their life and their circumstances, immediately we want to make it all better for them. But there are seasons where we simply do not have the capacity to be able to do that. We simply just need to be able to listen, to hear their story. Let them speak. Create an environment of safety and security, that truth and honesty can be revealed, and we can enter into a deeper understanding of who we are in community. And so David comes at the beginning of his psalm, and he comes to God and says, "Hear my plea, God." And then he goes on and talks about the things that are stressing him, the opposition that he's feeling. And you can feel the tension just rising and rising and rising. On verses 4 through 5, "My heart is in anguish within me. The terrors of death have fallen on me. Fear and trembling have beset me, and horror has overwhelmed me." David's laying it all out on the table. He's laying it all out there. There's no inhibition about what he's feeling. There's no inhibition about being truthful to the creator of the universe. David comes and he expresses his anxiety. Verses 6 through 8, he says, times of seeking. David talks about a time of seeking of refuge and release. The challenge with anxiety that it always exists. It is always there. And it's a matter of how we address it and guide it. And David's taken, in these couple of verses in here, he's taking kind of like an opt-out. If only I were like doves, that I could just flee this situation. How many times have we been in those circumstances? Where we feel overwhelmed, where we feel, I just want to check out. I just want to get away from reality, and I just want to go someplace else. I know I have. I have a lot. But the reality is that we still need to address the issues. And David comes back to this in verses 9 through 15. He goes through and he begins just to lay out the things that are stressing him, this common sense of anxiety and stress that he is feeling. And for us, we have between family and work and life and in our nation, and the circumstances are there, we have this sense of growing anxiety and stress. John, let's go ahead and put up it's kind of like this noise that it just regularly, it's always about us. It's just constantly there. And whenever we go, the tension level is filled. And we have this the blood pressure rises and the tension it enlarges, and then it's kind of like, what do we grow accustomed to the noise and the hum of the things around us, and it creates a sense of tension. Okay, you can go ahead and lower it back down. Stress, it's always there. But what do we do about that? In verses 16 through 18, David comes back around. And it's interesting, here he begins to preach to himself. He begins to tell stories to himself of God's faithfulness. He begins to remember the truths that he knows in the midst of the struggle that he's in the midst of the opposition that's beset him. And for each of us, that opposition could be a coworker at work that knows you're a believer and detests you. It could be family members that there's for whatever reason, there's this tension in infighting. It could be uncertainty of employment and finances. It could be uncertainty of what the future holds for you. Here's what anxiety looks like in the Cain household. It'll be a year next month that my wife Sue was diagnosed with breast cancer. She was diagnosed in November. Surgery in December. Radiation January, February. On a protocol for the next 5 years of taking some estrogen medication to prevent cancer from coming back. Breast cancer, it feeds on estrogen in women's bodies. In May, 27-year-old daughter Christy talked to my wife and says, I got this bump on the side of my rib cage and it's kind of annoying and I'm not really sure what it is. She works out a lot and it just kind of had this rubbing sensation over there. And my wife Sue said, well, you really should probably go get it checked out. It's probably nothing, but you should go get it checked out. So she does. Goes into a doctor, gets it checked out. They say, that's odd. Let's do some tests. Diagnosed with breast cancer at 27. Surgery in June, radiation July and August. Starting a hormone therapy over the next 5 years this last week. Third step in our healing process. In times of anxiety and stress, when we could look to the what ifs and what might and the unknown, we can become overwhelmed and immobilized. We can come cocooned and trying to withdraw into ourselves and begin to question, God, where are you at this? I don't get it. 27 years old, I don't get it. Then I have to remember what David does here. He comes and he reminds himself about the promises, the truths that he knows and has experienced, that in the midst of his struggle, this is the truth that you know. As for me, I called to God, and the Lord saved me. Evening, morning, and noon, I cry out in distress, and he hears my voice. He rescues me unharmed from the battle waged against me. David had to come and remember the truths that he knew about God. What his experience of what relationship with God was like, and he had to remind himself in the midst of the struggle that he was going through, this I know to be true. I will come to you in worship, morning, noon, and night. I will come to you and speak of who you are. I will acknowledge your lordship over me, and I'll trust in you. When I began to reflect over some of the circumstances, and we live in a broken world, and we're not there yet. All of us have circumstances, stresses, anxieties that we deal with to various degrees and circumstances. But when we're honest and truthful and allow God into that, and we allow community into that, and we allow our story to be told, we can remember and reflect on the good things and the promises of God, and it changes a perception. And so when Sue and I were talking with Christy's situation, when she was diagnosed, it's like, well, if my wife Sue hadn't gone through, and it's best case scenario for both. I mean, it's early stage cancer. They caught it early, fully anticipating a recovery from that. But in reflection, if Sue hadn't gone through what she did, the likelihood that my daughter would even ask her, about this bump on her rib cage, and it could have been a year or 2 years down the road, and we'd be telling a different story right now. Reflect on the goodnesses and promises of God and the circumstances that we're going through, and realizing, God, you, in the midst of the struggle, you are real, you are present, you are good, and you are for us. And it's when we do that, perception changes. Now, the noise still exists, but the perception changes. At the very end of this psalm, David goes back through and he talks about the struggle that he has again. But in the midst of, God, you are there, the struggle. I wish I could go. God, you are good. I remember it's the struggle. And then he comes back to the very end of the psalm. Verse 22 and 23. Cast your cares on the Lord, and he will sustain you. He will never let the righteous be shaken. But you, God, will bring down the wicked in the pile of decay. The bloodthirsty and deceitful will not live half their days. But as for me, I trust in you. Here's the point. David comes back around to, in the midst of the battle that he's going through, worshiping God. Worship overcomes worry. When we place ourselves in a sense of worship, when we place ourselves in a sense of coming to God's presence and acknowledging who he is, there is a shift between the stress and what happens in worship. Let's go ahead and crank up the crowd noise. Now, going into worship doesn't make this go away. It is still there. Financial struggles, job struggles, relational challenges. But when we bring in worship, it begins to drown out the worry. It brings us into a place that we can come before God and acknowledge who he is. Okay, go ahead. Stephen and your team, why don't you go ahead and come on up. We're gonna put this into practice here in just a minute. Take some time to end our time together in worship. And here's what I want you to do. Whatever those circumstances are that you're going through, that you may be experiencing, or possibly situations that you haven't even revealed to somebody yet. An experience, a struggle, an issue, whatever that may be. Begin to release that as we go into worship. Just submit it to God. Be honest. There doesn't have to be any pretense. There doesn't have to be any putting on a facade. Just be honest and real as we go through and begin to enter into worship. There are a few takeaway questions, application points that I would like to pass on to you. First, what is an issue or situation that is causing you stress or anxiety? We talked a little bit about that. Who is our trusted people in your life that you can be completely honest and vulnerable with in telling your story? I want to elaborate a little bit on this. We were made for community. We were never meant to live in isolation and separation from each other. God created us to be part of a body. Paul talks about this. We are dependent and interdependent on each other. Creating a safe place to be able to come. Your small groups are getting going. Maybe you've never joined a small group. You know, I know at Mill Creek, I can every service, I know of the community that will jet out right after the service is over. They come for a circumstance, and then they take off. Being drawn together in community. Having the freedom to know and be known, to be seen and to see others. To be able to listen and to hear. Without judgment. Without trying to solve everybody's problems. Just being able to listen. Offering encouragement and support. Being part of a community. If you haven't, you need to be. If it's something that you're scared about, that's okay. It's safe. Will you be hurt? Yeah, everybody gets hurt. You can't live life without being hurt. But it's where you can be known. And it's where community begins to develop. That those that are within our culture, that are stressed out and lonely, the Northwest is the number one place in the U.S. for loneliness and isolation. Whether it be weather, community, whatever it may be, I don't know. Research is being done trying to figure out what that is. But we are a region of people that withdraw and hibernate. And what God calls us to is to open the doors and invite in. Walk through the door. Third point. Is worship through song an active part of your daily devotional life and routine? It's growing in mine. In the season of life that Sue and I have gone through. Worship helps me to focus in on who God is so that I can know who I am. Worship allows me to express to the creator of the universe who he is. And it was when that arms are open that he comes and he touches. Yesterday and the day before, we were over in Wenatchee. My older daughter, Brittany, and son-in-law, my grandson, live in Wenatchee. And so I was helping them paint their house. And so I had all sorts of time throughout the 2 days just to be able to pray and enter into a time of worship. As Pastor Eidelman says, worship overcomes worry. It doesn't solve all the issues, but it shifts our mindset that we can focus in on God. And when he does that, he touches our spirit. So let's go ahead and stand, and Stephen and Rachel will lead us in a time of worship as we begin to close out the service this morning.
Thanks so much for tuning in with us today on our podcast. We really care about you, and we hope that you are encouraged by the Lord today and challenged to live with him on mission more and more. If you need prayer, or if you want to contact us for whatever reason, you can go ahead to our website at terracefoursquare.org, and we'd love to hear from you. We hope you have a great week.